Welcome back on the Good Morning Artesia radio show, and joining us, Mayor Raye Miller. Good morning.
Good morning.
Appreciate you sending in all the surrogates over the last few times to come in and chat with us.
It's a thing where, I've had too many things going on in my life, but I guess, that's a good thing. That keeps me out of trouble, or into trouble, as the case may be. But, I appreciate Mayor Pro Tem Hill for all he does, because all of the counselors spend a lot more time than folks realize involved in the work of the city. And then Councilor Mullen, I love George. In fact, I didn't know him before he ran for council and I ran for mayor, but really impressed with him as, I think he's very thoughtful. I think he considers every issue and looks at what's best for Artesia and makes the decision as to how he votes based on what he believes best. And he doesn't always go with the crowd, but that's because if he doesn't believe that it's best, then he'll vote the way he believes is correct. And that's all you can ask for, is somebody to give thoughtful consideration. And truly, I believe his heart is for what is best for the city, which is what you hope you have in every counselor. Yeah.
Oh, no question about it. I was talking with someone yesterday about city council activities back in the day, like back in the 90s when I was here, and it's a lot different now. I mean, not everybody has the same opinion on everything, but it seems like you have your discussion, you have your debates, and then when a decision is made, the city moves forward with that.
Well, yeah, in the 80s, when I came to town, if there wasn't a good picture show at the theater, going to city council was great entertainment value. In fact, I went several times just because it was quite entertaining. The days of Greek Economides and Mayor Thompson and Joe Aguilar and Barragon and all, they had some interesting vocal discussions.
For a while there, we were putting on the radio the council meetings.
Right.
And then I noticed on several occasions that a counselor would not come into the meeting when there was a certain issue that was going to be discussed or voted on. They would sit in the car and listen on the radio. And then after that vote or issue had passed or whatever, then they would come in, and I said, well, I'm not going to be a part of that. Yeah. So that's when we took it off the radio.
Well, and now it can be so boring that no one would want to listen. So, I mean, last night I think we had, outside of someone from the Daily Press, I think we had two other people besides staff there, and one of the folks was from the hospital because there was an issue that the fire department was working on, so she was there probably in support of them and to help answer any questions that might arise. And I think the other person may be considering running for office. I don't know why they were there, but when we asked for public comment, nobody came up and spoke. So,
well, and speaking of that, Haley mentioned this on her segment yesterday. There is an election on the first Tuesday in November,
right? And
there's some school board seats that are up, and the mill levy. I think the hospital and the schools have their mill levy continuation. But Haley said there had been some confusion, people thinking that maybe city council stuff was going to be on the ballot this time around. It's not. It's going to be in the spring, right?
The state legislature has tried to get everybody to consolidate their elections, and council has visited the issue twice now, prior to the last election, and then here back when for this election. And there were a variety of reasons. Judge Kuiper had an issue at the first one, and then Councilor Madrid had an issue, and so council decided to actually continue to hold our election in March, which, it actually costs the city about $10,000 if we don't conform with what the state wants. If we had done it in November, there wouldn't have been that special cost to us. And then I thought, and actually both of the reasons Kuiper had wanted to serve to March, well, then she actually retired January 1st, which would have been the date of the other election's effectiveness. And then Manuel Madrid didn't think he could get his campaigning set up and all done before the election because of the time that was remaining between the decision and that November. And he decided not to run when it came up. So it wound up being a thing where I thought, well, let's revisit it. And probably the council will actually, and the council discussed it, lots of concerns about, and I don't know if it's just because it was changed or what, but anyway, they decided to actually keep it, which, I mean, I honestly think, and it's like the election here for school board and stuff, unless you're in a actively contested district, it winds up being a thing where there's very little fanfare or attention being paid to this election. Well, if council, mayor, school board, all of the things had all been together, then it would have, given at least a little more of folks' attention to the fact that there is something. Now, I've already voted, but it was a thing where it was by accident because I was down at the clerk's office here in Artesia, the substation, recording a document and saw that we were voting. And I asked, what are we voting on? I mean, you'd think I'd be an informed citizen, but I'm like everybody else. And
busy. And
they said, oh, no, it's the November stuff. Here's all the, and they had sample ballots of all the stuff. And I looked at it and I said, well, I guess while I'm here, after I got my stuff recorded, I read all the stuff while they were doing the recording for me, and I says, well, I guess I ought to just go ahead and vote while I'm here so I get it out of the way. But because I knew if I didn't, I'd probably forget to do it because, I don't think I live in one of the contested race areas. So, it's, but that's why we did it. And, council have the opportunity to revisit it. And at some point, the state may just mandate that we don't have the option. But I know
for now, it's
still the city has the option to. But we don't run our own election, even if we do it in March. It's really directed by the county and overseen by the state. So I know there was concern by some of the council of not having our own control. Well, we really don't have control
either way. Yeah. So the people will be able to pick up their packets to review in early January, and then
the filing dates are in early January, and then the election, I think, is in March. And there'll be every district has one counselor who will be up for either re-election if they choose to run. So half of the council seats, there's 2 counselors from each district, half of them come up this election. 2 years later, the other half will come up for election. So you can change half of the council at one time. You can't change the whole council. And I know years ago there was, so much, well, I think the community finally realized that there were problems in the fights that were going on in city, and as a result there was a strong effort to actually oust half of the council, and 2 years later, and so we had quite a change of council back in those days, and probably rightly so. If you've gotten into the personal side of politics to where you can't logically work on things together, then you probably need new folks that don't have those same personal biases involved. And this council works well together. Like you say, they're not always going to agree with everything as a group, but they are certainly all trying to manage things in a way that is the best for the city and stuff. And so I'm very happy with the council. In fact, I I'd be pleased if every one of them ran for re-election that's up. I think this time it'll be Kemp Bratcher's seat. It'll be George Mullen, I believe Terry Hill, and then Raul is probably the other one who's up for election this time. And the ones who came in last time are Nacho and Jared Moreau, Sam Hagelstein, and Jeff Yahtzee, I think, was up 2 years ago. So,
and in all of this, the mayor's position is...
The mayor's position comes up on this time's election because obviously it's a 4-year thing. The other thing about serving on council while we're talking about it, because last night our agenda was extremely short. We were there 35 minutes, and partly that was just because I knew it was going to be short, so I presented some quarterly budget review stuff. Because otherwise it would even been shorter than 35 minutes. But, the council, they don't get paid a lot, but they do receive a small amount for it. But then what folks usually don't realize is most of the work actually occurs at the committees, and every counselor is assigned to multiple committees. And really, this last time when we made committee assignments, I really taxed some of our retired counselors just because I know that they're willing to spend the time because they don't have the 8-to-5 job, as well as family and stuff. And so they're on a few additional committees to where we get good coverage of, counselors in committees. But, we always go through and have reports of the committees, and a lot of times there's not a lot of information brought forward. But, I think the rec committee, which is Councilor Rodriguez, there's a rec commission meeting this coming Monday night. I think the planning committee, which is Jim McGuire's group, they have a committee meeting. Is today Wednesday? I think it's this afternoon at 4:30. I know personnel has a meeting. Committee has a meeting scheduled for the 20th, and they've actually, I think they're going to do a potential quorum notice, so that if any of the other counselors or myself want to attend, that they're able to, because some of our committees have only 3 counselors on them. Other committees, which personnel is one of, has 4 committee members. And so if there's 4 committee members or 4 council members on the committee, then as mayor, I can't appear before that committee because it would be considered a potential quorum violation. And the Open Meetings Act doesn't allow us to have too many of us in an area because of concerns of us appearing to make decisions outside of the public forum type thing. So we're actually going to notice a potential quorum for the Personnel Committee meeting, where if any of the other counselors are interested in the discussion by the committee or myself, I can actually attend. But, a lot of the work, and I know the Infrastructure Committee meets regularly, as well as Police and Fire. And, I know that there was an issue brought forward about some of the different types of ATV vehicles and all, potentially are requests by citizens for those to be legal on the streets, which they're not at this point. Well, there was a whole meeting that Police and Fire had to visit with those folks and talk about the pros and the cons, and get information to the counselors that serve on that committee for them to evaluate. And so far there has not been any type of recommendation out of the committee to make a change. And so but it's a thing where that way you actually get a chance for everybody to speak their mind. and to try, if they have reasons, to convince counselors that it's something that should be changed, or that it shouldn't be changed, or it should be changed one way or another. And then when the committee makes a recommendation to council, we believe they've vetted the situation. It's just like our Planning and Zoning Commission. Those folks, many of them have served on that commission longer than any of our counselors have been counselors. And so they have a wisdom of all of the subdivision work and stuff that folks have done over the years as to the history of, well, we did this for this person, why would we not consider doing something similar? Or
Right.
we didn't do this for this person, why would we now consider doing the
Sure.
same thing for this person, because it's something that has not been accepted as approval. And so that continuity and history, as well as, and those folks all are volunteers who attend monthly meetings and listen to the problems, and at times their job can be very difficult, because there were certainly in the discussion with New Haven of Hope, there was folks who were strongly in favor of it, and there were folks that were strongly opposed to it, and they wound up having two meetings because of a notice problem where they heard from both sides, and not always the same folks at both meetings. But
Sure.
When the council actually receives a recommendation from Planning and Zoning, it's very difficult for someone to actually then come to council and try to change the recommendation, because one, you would have hoped that they would have attended the Planning and Zoning, because that's really where all of the good discussion should occur, and the consideration, and those folks make what we believe are good recommendations. And as a result, it's hard for the council to have only pieces of information and only a one-side presentation on it to actually then try to consider overturning what they've done. And so, I always, if someone has a problem, I highly recommend that they appear before Planning and Zoning, because if the staff recommends it and Planning and Zoning recommends it, then for them to actually defeat it at council is going to be extremely difficult, because of the
Right.
fact that the process is designed to actually be handled at the Planning and Zoning type of meeting.
And it's probably good for the individual citizens to know who their two counselors are, because that may be the start of the process if there is an issue that somebody wants to have addressed.
Yeah, and it's a thing where we try at this point to alert counselors to issues. When I first became mayor, basically under the Open Meetings Act, our insurer was recommending that we not text anything to the group. And I tried to get clarification from the Attorney General's office, and
Bigger fish.
no, it was a thing where they responded, but
They
their
did.
response was and their final conclusion was, talk to your city attorney. Well, I'm like, well, the city attorney is not the expert on this law. You all are.
Right.
Why would I want him to give me advice? Why don't you tell me whether it makes
Because if there's
sense?
an issue, it's going to...
Wind up in their hands.
Yes, yeah.
And so they actually put on a program down in Carlsbad. They were doing them around the state, where it was education of public folks for Opens Meeting Act. Well, I went and sat through their presentation, not because I didn't already know what they were presenting, but I wanted to see if I could get my questions answered, because it was actually attorneys for the
For the AG?
for the AG that were actually doing the presentation.
Yeah.
And so when they had a break, he says, now if anybody has any questions, they can come up and ask, because they were thinking it would be the simple questions related to what they just presented. And so I walked up, and a lady walked up right behind me from Roswell, and I posed the question to him. I says, in this day and age of technology, I recognize that we cannot do anything that looks like we're making a decision or discussing an issue, but for notice purposes, why can't we advise our folks that, we have a water leak that's caused us to shut down a section of the city in the way of a text to our folks so that everyone is aware of it? But we have, as long as we do not respond to it, we're making no decisions, we have no interaction between us, it's just a notice purposes, is there any reason we can't do that? And he says, well, legally I can't give you advice, but he says, I see no problem with that.
Okay.
And he says, but I can't give you advice. And I says, that's fine. This lady, and I asked her where she is from, and she said she's from Roswell. I says, well, this lady from Roswell heard you tell me that, and that's exactly the answer that I'm looking for, because, there's no reason that we shouldn't, notify our counselors if an event is going on in the city. But the only thing that we will allow the counselors to do is acknowledge they received the text. Because at my age, sometimes when I send a text and then I don't get a response the next day and nobody shows up, they go, well, did you actually send it? And I
Yes.
look back and I forgot to hit the send.
Oh, no.
But anyway, and so at this point, our department heads, if there is an event that's happening that they believe the council should be aware of, so that if a citizen calls and says, hey, I've got no water at my house, they can say, well, yeah, there's a problem at 13th and Man. They've had a major break, and it may be a little while, but they're working on it.
Yeah.
And so as a result, Byron can text to the council, advise them of a water break. If there's, shooting or something involving police, the chief of police, if he believes the council would want to be aware of it, can actually send us a group text. The group goes to all the counselors. It also goes to Lisa Waller, and Lisa winds up making a copy of it and putting it in a file, so that if there's ever a question as to what information was disseminated to all the council under these, and then we've advised council that all they can answer is either okay or thanks. Because you can't, in other words, they can't ask questions,
Right.
Even about the stuff. If they have a question, they can call me, and then I can call the department head and actually ask the question, and I can respond back to them personally.
But it's not a discussion.
It's not a discussion, and we would never want to be looking at something that related to a personnel, to a decision, or to any type of action that would result. It just we want to stay within the law, but in this day and age of technology, to prohibit you from group texting dissemination of information to your council just made no sense at all. So
Yeah, and it's interesting, the response, or what you had to go through to get that answer from the Attorney General's office.
Well, yeah, because like I say,
because you're wanting to do the right thing.
But at the same time, when you have technology, why wouldn't you try to utilize it?
Yeah,
But anyway, it's one of those things where it's interesting.
It sure is. Mayor Ray Miller is with us. We're going to take a break for some news items, the Eddy County Sports Report, so forth. We'll be back and hopefully take about 10 minutes to recap the 20-minute council meeting. So don't go away. We'll be right back.